Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm all right. Are you outside, or do you have a very
No,
good IT guy?
it's amazing, isn't it? So I have an incredible backdrop, which they've sent to my home, and there's a skylight which is sending light in almost exactly the place as it is in the photograph in the background. So it looks like I am outside, but I'm not.
Oh, that is actually a real backdrop. It's not like a computer
Yeah,
generated
it is a
forgery.
real thing.
Wowzers!
Yeah.
It is stars after all. I'm sure they've got a bit of
Yeah, exactly.
a few pennies to spare. This show, second season. The first season went great guns. You must have been really excited to get back to season two because it felt like the audience and you guys as well all really wanted to continue the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the first series was taking you up to the point where you think you might be familiar with the story in terms of Catherine and Henry, and yeah, they've read the king and queen that we sort of know from history books, but delving into a whole bit of history that I think is normally ignored before all of the wife swapping happens.
Yeah, and I mean, some of these shows, Spanish Princess, the White Princess, White Queen, all of these shows, they seem to touch a nerve with audiences. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think people have such a kind of affinity for history and these amazing women and these stories that we haven't seen before?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a period that you learn about in school, but very much from the perspective of the kings, really. And certainly Henry VIII is this sort of an almost comic figure in your head, I feel like, with his many wives and how he got rid of them. So I think to look at it from a different angle and from the perspective of women um, is so interesting to sort of see them um, in a place where they're so often kind of without power to make their own choices in the same way that we would do today. But there's so much that feels familiar, and I think you see that with this series, the sort of questions of being a mother, and for Catherine, a lot of that is producing an heir and the pressures on her to do that. And I think that is a sort of timeless thing that we can all still relate to, I think.
Yeah, and you're obviously a bit of a pro going back for second seasons, given you did it with Downton many
Yeah.
times over. I mean, how unique is that for an actor to go back to to a role that you've played for a year and then go back again? I mean, what is that kind of unique challenge like for you specifically?
Well, I mean, it's great fun. I mean, because you get to know this big gang, your crew and your cast. It you found, you form such bonds, I think, through filming, and so to come back and see each other and pick up where you left off, and then have new people join the gang as well. It's a real treat. And then yeah, to keep going with the character and see where they're headed um, is really interesting, and a real gift, I think, for an actor to keep going and see what happens next for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this show, what was your reaction to the first season? Because it seemed to go down a tree. I mean, people were talking about it, and you get a good sense of it on when you watch sort of interviews on YouTube and see you guys all chatting about it. That everybody seems to flock to them and watch them. I mean, do you get a sense of that with you guys? That it's now you were in between sort of series one and series two. Do you get a sense of that it is something quite substantial and there is quite a
Yeah.
big audience for this?
Well, yeah, and it definitely feels very international, which is nice. I think it really travels and translates really well. Um, so that's lovely to sort of hear responses from around the world. But yeah, it's always exciting. It's always nerve-wracking coming back in for the second and hoping that you live up to those expectations. But yeah, I certainly understand the appetite to see where these characters go.
Yeah. And I mean, what drew you to this to Maggie after reading the scripts and everything? What was the initial kind of attraction for you to her? Because she's someone that we know a bit about in history, but we don't quite know the context, and the show tries to give us a bit more of that context as we go through it.
Yeah, well, I think I was so interested in this woman who has to kind of play nice within the court. All of her family, pretty much across the board, were murdered by the Tudors, and she's married into, this lovely man, Richard Pole, to try and keep her loyal to Henry. And so, for her, it's this really difficult position of having to support the Tudors and support the royal family, whilst also knowing that it's because they're on the throne that so many of her family have gone. So that was always really interesting. So the kind of duty and then a sort of practicality of trying to keep her children safe. And in this, children are growing up, and Ursula, her daughter, is thinking about marrying. It's really hard for Maggie to see her be so clear-cut in her moves to find a good match, to just marry well, money, and to be in a good position in court. It's kind of heartbreaking to see her daughter do so well in this arena that she found so difficult herself, I think. And so I just thought that was such an interesting path to tread for a woman who has a lot going on and a lot she wishes she could say and do, but she can't. Otherwise, she'd get her head chopped off. I think that's sort of fascinating thing about these times, is that they're incredibly dangerous for everyone. The closer you get to the royals, I think.
Yeah, and it must be exciting as well going back for a second season, because you get to delve into not just the story but your character as well. You get to know, my friend always put it that in the second season you get to dive into the mythology a bit more, and you kind of do with many shows. So it must be exciting to go back. And were there surprises for you with your character that when you went back and you read the scripts for season 2 that you thought, oh, they've gone this way and they're telling this particular story?
Yeah, I think there's lots of really interesting things for Maggie this year. She goes through a lot, and I think it is in the balance of getting more comfortable as Catherine's lady in waiting. She's fully in with the Queen now. That's still quite difficult, but it's her role. And then also she strikes up a friendship with Thomas More, who is this very interesting man, very godly man, and Maggie finds a lot of comfort in his friendship, and that sort of leads her in a different direction, as she's, a lonely woman. She has needs, and so he's played brilliantly by Andy Buchan. So that was a real treat to have him come on board, because he's a phenomenal actor and great to work with. So we had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about I don't know if you've seen it. Well, you've obviously been in the series, so of course you know. But in the trailer and in the poster, you obviously see Charlotte in her armor gear, but carrying her baby, which is such an amazing, not just an amazing image for the show, but amazing image for what this woman stood for and what she was about and the history. I mean, how important do you think a message like that is, that there was a woman like this who was doing these things and was pushing herself to the point where she was going to the battlefield while carrying a baby?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? There's a lot in this series that you think, oh, STARZ have really gone to town and made some stuff up. And then you realize that it's true. And it's the amazing thing that it's not more well known. I think Catherine's image in the history books that I, was taught from is the sort of first-born wife who was able to give him a son, and very pious, and not this woman that we see in the series who is very political, very intelligent, had a lot of responsibility, had a lot of influence with the king, and then also was this great warrior. So I think it's an amazing thing that it takes us to this point to be able to tell that story with the fanfare that it needs, and I think it will have a lot of people cheering from their sofas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you guys seem to have a great rapport as an ensemble, and I guess it's good to. It seems like it's one of those ensembles where, because you're telling a serious story and you're telling a bit of history, that you look like a group that has a lot of levity in between and have a lot of fun in between. Absolutely. All these things. And obviously, I guess the locations and stuff help because you're in that world. But how important is that you guys get to kind of let off a bit of steam and have a bit of fun in between all the seriousness?
It's very important. I mean, period drama is so such a team effort to have that level of detail across every inch of the screen is a real takes an army, you know. So you do need that, and that's very time level of work. To get one actor dressed in the morning requires a lot of help from a huge costume department. So there's a lot of waiting around. There's a lot of getting things set up. Every camera move is a big organization and a big move. So yeah, there's a lot of crosswords that happen in between, as in puzzles, and bananagrams, which is a game that we played a lot on Downton. But yeah, you need kind of things to keep you amused in between. And yeah, I'd have a lot of fun with Richard Pepper and Phil Cumbus and Andy Buchan doing the quick crosswords throughout the day. So you just need those things to kind of keep you going and keep the day ticking along, and planning what you're gonna have for lunch. You know, you need all that.
The important things.
Exactly. Yeah, what scene are we doing? I can't remember.
Yeah, have some tomato soup today. I just wanted to ask you about you. I mean, you've had a fantastic year. Obviously, Downton this time last year was a huge success at the cinema, which seems like an eternity ago now, that considering what's happened in the last year.
So weird.
And also you've had your other TV show, which has gone great guns, which had a lot of interest. I mean, are you enjoying this period that you're able to do so many diverse things? I mean, is that something that kind of keeps you going, that you do seek out things that are always different and challenging, I guess?
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was my dad. He was doing so good. There's a guy with a ladder outside the front window. It's too much for a Jack Russell to cope with. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It's the downside of virtual junkets.
Yeah. He's tiny and harmless, but he has a big buff. Ned. Okay. So yeah, I've got very lucky. The last few jobs have been so different and so diverse, and kind of we're back to back in the last year, going from Australia to the Downton press tour and then straight into Spanish Princess. So it's been a real treat to kind of be doing so many different things. And yeah, I loved it. I loved doing The Secret She Keeps in the midst of it all, because it's such a different world of, you know, that's not time consuming getting dressed in the morning. It's throwing on your costumes and looking a bit grim. And so it's a really nice thing to have that contrast and to look for roles that are so different.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a final question, and obviously the movie of Downton was hugely successful, and given, you know, it's a bit restrictive now as to what you can do. Have they given you any indication that that there might be a second one, or is it kind of in a bit of flux given what's going on?
Yeah, I think they're keen, and I think the one thing that you could say that lockdown is good for is giving writers time, and so yeah, we're sort of waiting to see what Julian comes up with. But yeah, we were amazed and delighted with how it went down, and certainly the noises are there that it could be something that could be explored again, which is great, and not at all anything that we imagined to happen, having left the series where we did. So it was a real treat. But again, for us, it was just so lovely to have it in a different world and bring those Downton fans to the cinema. And I found that all really quite moving, because we'd hear stories of you know, people taking their grandmothers to the cinema and they hadn't been to the theatres, you know, movie theatres for 20 years, and suddenly they were going to watch Downton. So that felt really special, and hopefully we'll be in a place where we can do that again soon.
Fingers crossed. Listen, lovely to talk to you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
I'll let you go and deal with your dog.
I'm so sorry.
I know, it's fine. It's all good.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey You Guys.